Good afternoon, friends. Welcome to another edition of IFA Galaxy's webinar series. As you know, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Friday afternoons, 3 to 4, we reserve for knowledge updation. We have another very interesting speaker today, somebody who's going to throw light on the Indian economy and how it is going to shape up post-COVID and what it means for our investments and in our investors. So Aarti Krishnan is no new face for IFA Galaxy. She has been in our conferences and our quarterly summits before. But to do the formal introduction, may I request Srinivasan to please introduce Aarti Krishnan to the audience now.
Thank you, Babu. Today we have Aarti Krishnan. She's basically a cost accountant. She's also an MBA in finance. She has been tracking financial markets for the past 25 years. Accountant and an MBA in finance. She has been tracking the financial markets for the past 25 years. She has been with the Hindu business line from 1995. Currently, she's the editorial consultant for Hindu business line. She was also consulting editor for Value Research Online for 6 years. Currently, she is head of investment and insurance product at Prime Investor. She has got a lot of accolades and awards, and Shriram Sanlam Award for excellence in financial journalism. She has got it 3 times. She's a sort of a speaker across the financial world, and today we invite her to share her experience and thoughts on the topic, what's ahead for the economy and investors. Welcome, ma'am. Welcome, Aarti.
Thank you so much for having me here, IFA Galaxy. I know this is afternoon and sleeping time, and at 4 o'clock, Nirmala Sitharaman is going to wake you all up quite with her announcements. So I'm glad all of you could make it to this. And also a topic like the economy is usually so macro, people feel a little bored to attend it, but I'll try to make it as interesting as possible. I'm also glad to know that some people who are celebrating special occasions are here and sparing time for this. So thanks a lot. So I'll be sharing a presentation and talking alongside it. And perhaps at the end, we could do the questions. I hope that is okay with the panelists, right? So I'll start sharing my screen. Just tell me if it's visible. Yeah, is it clear to all of you? Yeah. So I purposely left out the word corona here because I'm sure we're all tired of hearing of this corona and COVID and etc. So I'll focus mainly on what is ahead for the Indian economy and what's ahead for the investors. It is not that any of us have all the answers still, but from my current reading of the situation and from what I'm seeing, that is basically on what I'm going to base my presentation. So we are now 50 days into the lockdown, right? March 24th they announced it, and April has been a month of complete shutdown in the economy. This is completely different from any other crisis we've seen before it. Like I know the temptation is strong to compare it to 2009 global financial crisis or 2000 dot-com burst, but this is very different because this is a situation in which businesses are completely shut down. I mean, there are many factories, many services which have zero sales for the month of April, right? So obviously the numbers are going to look alarming for April, and this is what some of the macro indicators showed for April, right? So you have the manufacturing PMI, which is 27.4. What does it mean? 50, number 50 on manufacturing PMI means that there is no growth compared to last month. So 27.4 means manufacturing has shrunk by some 45% in the month of April. This is not surprising. We all know that factories have been shut. Now, services is even more surprising in the sense over 90% shrinkage, because 50 is the number which shows normal activity. So 5. So the shrinkage has been to the extent of 90%. This is because services largely rely on people movement, and people movement has been completely controlled in this period, right? One good indicator of how the economy, yeah.
One request I have is to make that screen bigger so that the presentation can appear.
Make it full
screen.
And also the volume, they want it to be slightly higher. Sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
Thank you.
No,
No, no.
Is this
can you make it into a presentation mode?
one sec. Yeah. Is
Excellent.
this okay?
Yeah,
Okay.
This is fine.
perfect.
Volume is fine, I think.
Volume is okay?
Yeah, it's okay. It's for me, it's fine.
Okay. I'll
Fine,
speak a
70.
little louder.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Then if you look at fuel consumption, this is basically petrol and diesel consumption in the month of April fell 46%. Coal India shipments, they show how much the power sector is working, and that shows minus 25%. Now, India Inc.'s March quarter numbers have started coming in, and obviously only a small part of March was affected by the lockdown. But if you look at the numbers, so far the companies have shown 1.9% growth in sales and a 12% fall in profits, right? This is just to set a background of what the country will look like if you have a lockdown that goes on and on, right? Now, if you come to a GDP focus, usually when you ask economists to say what will happen to the economy, no economist will tell you, I don't have a clue, right? Just like fund managers. If you ask fund managers, what do you think of market? Have you ever heard them say, we don't know? Actually, in many situations, they have to say it, but they don't, right? So similarly, if you ask forecasters, they will give forecasts. So though nobody has a clue actually about what is likely to be the growth, people have put out their own forecasts. And here I have taken the fairly large agencies, not some unknown ones. So World Bank is saying India's economy will grow 1.8 to 2.8% positive growth in FY21. CRISIL is saying 1.8, Moody's is saying 0, safe, he's playing it quite safe. Now you have people like Nomura who are saying minus 5%. And Nomura is quite a big foreign investor in Indian markets, both debt and equities. So you can see this wide range of forecasts. What I would urge is we cannot take all of this seriously today. The very diversity in the forecast. If one person is saying plus 3% and another person is saying minus 5%, what it goes to show is that the uncertainty is so high that people are not able to actually put a number to it, right? So they will keep revising this as time goes by. As more data comes in, they will keep revising this forecast. But what is really worrying to me, it is not about the economy, the services, manufacturing, etc. Because I feel if the lockdown is lifted, things can resume. It is this unemployment number. Now, a large proportion of the Indian economy is actually, we know, MSMEs and self-employed people. And this CMA data tells us what has been happening to the small workers, the self-employed people. So the CMI data says that the India's unemployment rate actually shot up to 23.5% in 20 April compared to 8.7% in March. What does it mean? Nearly 1/4 of the workforce is actually idling in April, right? So as IFAs, I'm sure this is relevant to you. It shows the extent to which people's incomes or jobs have suffered in this period, especially if they are not the salaried class. Okay. Now, if you divide this into the groups, 20 to 24 age group, 13 million people have lost their jobs. I feel a lot of this is actually from the IT sector, which has actually been laying off people quietly without actually admitting to it, right? Then there are 14 million people in the 25 to 29 age group, 33 million people in 30 to 39. As age goes up, actually the number of people who have lost jobs has gone up. We all know that companies, typically when they come to crisis, they try to cull the middle and top management rather than the bottom, right? Because that is gets them the maximum cost savings. So these are the people who have lost their jobs, right? So if you look at the kind of people who have lost their jobs, it is actually small traders, hawkers, daily wages. Usually, now 128 million of these people are there in the economy. 91 million today are not working. Today, it is, we should recognize that this is temporary because it is a lockdown situation. Similarly, entrepreneurs, if you see, out of 78 million, 18 million are actually currently in limbo. They are not actually carrying on business. This is CMI data, okay? Salaried employees, 86 million, 80 million are actually unemployed. But agriculture, surprisingly, has added jobs in this period. We know of many people who migrated back to the villages, and the rural India has not been much affected by this COVID also. So actually, agriculture has added jobs in this period. This is also the Rabi harvesting season. So actually, in rural India, activity has been going on. So what does this mean? I know from a health perspective and personal safety, family perspective, all of us want the lockdown to be extended. We feel Whenever there is an announcement, it will be lifted. We keep feeling, let them extend it a bit more. But it is actually extracting a very big toll on the economy. So lifting it is important. Whether you will lift it fully or you will leave certain hotspots and red zones unaffected, that is a call that can be taken. But for the economy as a whole, it is now important not only to permit people movement, goods movement, but also to permit people movement, right? Industries have been permitted to open selectively. Now, my husband also works in Sundaram Fastener, so they just started their factory in. They have one factory in Hosur, which is a green zone. Um, Opening was not easy at all because first of all you have to take so many precautions. Everybody has to wear masks. You have to sanitize the factory all the time, and every 1 hour you have to sanitize. 100 rules are there, and you also find that the employees are finding very difficult to come to work because there is no public transport, right? And many people have actually gone to their hometowns and they are not able to come back. So at about 30-35% capacity they are working. Now if you ask them, do they want to ramp up their capacity, most industries are saying no. This is because unless you open up the retail outlet and the consumer starts buying goods, why will industries want to produce, right? So nobody wants to just produce and keep it in their warehouse and incur carrying costs. So the first, unless the consumer outlets, the big dealerships, the big shops, etc., start opening, the industries cannot fully resume activity, right? Small shops have been allowed to open, but as of now, the larger ones are only partially open. So once you allow large industries to function, then the salaried employees will be fairly taken care of. Maybe of this 18 million, a few will again get back jobs and it won't be a problem. I feel for the salaried people, the government needs to announce tax waivers. It needs to say for 2 or 3 months, please don't pay income tax this year. I don't know if Ms. Sitaraman will be so generous. So far, the concessions have been quite small. So I'm hoping tax waivers will come and that will be a good move in my opinion, right? Because it will save people's salaries. Suppose I'm paying 20% tax and that 20% will now get added to my income if I'm given that concession. The moratorium was a good move for this reason because for 2-3 months at least you can defer your EMIs when you don't have a salary. But to really get the Indian economy moving, what needs to start is services. If all of us know that some 60 to 63% of the GDP today is services. And when we talk of services, immediately all of us think of IT, telecom, and all these fancy things. Actually, that doesn't drive the Indian economy. What the Indian economy is driven by is these small shopkeepers, trade, construction, retail outlets, plumbers, electricians, beauty parlors. These are actually the services segment of the economy, which makes up 2/3 of the economy. I think the government is realizing this, and that is why slowly you find that they're allowing these small self-employed people to start their work, right? We still don't know if demand is there. For example, today my father is 85 years old. He's a dementia patient also. But the last 2 weeks he's been saying, get me a haircut, get me a haircut. Okay. So we are telling him, you can't have a haircut because you can't go to the barber. Barber is not open. But he's getting so impatient to go to a barber, right? So once you allow these small shops to open, then you will be able to actually see the economy again coming back, right? And the good thing about this is services and self-employed people will find it the easiest to restart, right? Suppose a plumber wants to restart, it is so easy. He has to pick up his toolkit and go wherever people call him, right? It's not like starting up a Maruti Udyog plant in Manesar because so much of preliminary stuff has to be done. And we've also seen with the Vizag thing, what happens when you don't do enough prep and you suddenly start up a plant without adequate preparation, right? So services actually needs to be restarted to get the economy moving. But the other good thing is it is also easy to restart services in India because most of these people are self-employed and very small outfits, right? Suppose you're not allowing people movement, you're not allowing services to restart, I feel that people need income support in this period. Unfortunately, in India, most of the perks and the subsidies and the benefits go to farmers. Even initially, when this crisis broke, the government immediately said PM Kisan. Okay, but actually, PM Kisan is not in need of the support today. I feel it is the all these urban workers, low income workers who are in the major distress situation. So actually, the farm economy is not that badly off. It can do better also in future. So on the positive side, today anyway there's a lot of gloom and doom. So I thought I'll put the positive thing first. Indian economy and its people are highly resilient. Whenever we take a very gloomy position that things are finished and the economy is destroyed, people come back very quickly from adversity. Demonetization is an experiment where 85% of the cash in circulation, you suddenly took it away one day and you told people 500 and 1000 will not work, right? In any other economy, I think it would have taken a minimum of 1 year to 2 years for people to gain back their confidence in the economy, in the currency, in banking. In India, people are actually so resilient, and or I will say they are quite optimistic as people. So we saw within 2 quarters, GDP growth was actually back from demonetization. It was not even a big hit. In fact, some of the big companies did quite well. They didn't even do badly during demonetization. So if you look at this crisis also, I think though some people are saying forever life has changed and maybe people will change forever, they will sit in their homes and all. I do not believe that. I think people will really, once you give them this confidence that this virus is on the way down or the peak is over, we are not seeing that yet. But when we see it, I feel people will become optimistic and they will go back to their old lives to a large extent. I don't think they will be scared forever and all. It is not in human nature also to be like that, right? Since 62% of the GDP services, it is easy to restart that portion of the economy, and 62% is a large portion, right? And anyway, agriculture is in good shape. So industry is still only 20% of the economy, which will take time, in my opinion, right? Services demand comes from all of us, right? All of us employ these self-employed people for various services. And I'm sure all of us have some appliances lying at home which need repair. And the moment the lockdown is lifted, we are going to take the phone and call these people, right? And I don't think people are going to stop going to beauty parlors or even theaters. I don't think so, right? Maybe for the first few months they'll be scared, but after that they will resume life as usual, right? Agri sector is in good shape, and that's a very big thing because though agri sector is only 18% of the GDP, it is 45% of India's workforce. We have a record Rabi harvest because we had a good monsoon and a good post monsoon rain also. We are sitting on a very large Rabi harvest, which is 8 lakh crore value, and it is in very good shape. The only problem today is transporting it to the markets. And if the lockdown is lifted in phases, especially goods movement, etc., I think it will actually be good for the agri economy. The other good thing or bad thing, however you see it, is MSMEs are in deep pain today. We all know of MSME owners who are not able to pay salaries, etc. But the thing is, in our official GDP data, the MSME part is not measured at all initially, right? So when GDP data comes out, you get first advanced estimate, second advanced estimate, then provisional. Actually, the estimates which come out in the first 1 year, they don't include any MSME or informal sector data. They only take the formal sector data like IIP and all and they extrapolate it, right? So this MSME thing will not actually come out in the GDP data at all for the next 1 year or 2 years. Only when something shows up in the data, people will panic. I feel when it doesn't show up, it will all be happening in the background and it will actually not affect the markets, right? We saw this during demonetization also. Though people said there is wide distress, the GDP data was looking pretty good, 7.5%, 7% growth. I think we can have a similar situation now. So on the negative side, what is the problem? The MSMEs are in really bad shape, and there are 60 million MSMEs in India. So even if it doesn't show up in the data, it will be affecting the economy in some way, right? Because these MSME business owners are actually the people who must be consuming things, who must be buying things, hiring staff, etc. So definitely they will be in bad shape. So job losses and salary cuts put together will lead to postpone discretionary spending. So if I was thinking of upgrading my car, I may wait 6 more months. If I was thinking of taking on an EMI and buying a home, I will certainly wait a bit before things settle. But I am not going to possibly wait for buying my next phone or to buy a if I need to upgrade essential things, I will continue to do, right? So I feel discretionary spending, the one we can avoid, that we will postpone. Travel maybe will be hit for a long time. You may not go and travel with your family overseas or travel somewhere and have a fancy vacation for some time, right? A big problem for the Indian economy is whatever the efforts the government is making, it is not actually flowing to the economy because our banks are lacking in risk appetite. They are not willing to lend to anybody except the government itself. Okay. So recently, the banks were parking 8 lakh crore of rupees in RBI's reverse repo window. So what is RBI's reverse repo window? It is the place where RBI says, if you have excess overnight money, you please come and give it to me. I will pay you only 3.75%. RBI has been cutting this rate because it doesn't want banks to keep on coming and putting money there. So despite RBI cutting reverse repo rates, banks have been relentlessly parking 8 lakh crore, 9 lakh crore, etc. in the reverse repo window. What this shows is that banks are receiving so much of deposit flows that they are not able to actually lend out, or don't want to lend out, or not able to lend out, we can't say, right? So they are sitting on all this cash. So when we say the economy doesn't have liquidity, etc., it is not true. There is liquidity. All the liquidity is sitting with the banks. Okay. The trick is actually to make the banks lend somehow to people who need it. Without the credit and liquidity support from banks, even strong businesses will struggle to service the debt in the next few months. So we have reports from the rating agencies and all saying that for many companies, the interest cover will go below 1 in the next couple of quarters. Below 1 means their profits will not cover the interest even one time. That is a problem, right? So what has been happening on the stimulus? India has been quite late, we all know. And the package of 1.7 lakh crore that we announced was very small. The amounts that they put in, like 500 rupees into Jandan account, 2,000 rupees into PM Kisan, etc., were too small. When we were expecting that they will waive tax, they gave concessions like the penalty, the interest penalty will come down from 12% to 9%, etc. It is very, very small concessions. RBI actually has been very active on the stimulus front, but the problem with RBI stimulus is all its stimulus is routed through the banking system. No matter how much distress you see in the NBFCs or in mutual funds, RBI is not willing to directly engage with these parties. Every stimulus that it wants to give, it wants to route it only through banks. So even the MF credit line that we saw after Franklin Templeton, the whole thing was that RBI would give money to banks, and banks will use that money to buy out these corporate securities from the mutual funds. We know that banks did not actually even take the money from RBI, only 2,000, 3,000 crore they took in the first day. So banks themselves don't want to take it because they don't want to again take this risk of buying out these corporate bonds. Even AAA bonds, they were not keen to buy. So what we know that today a big stimulus is expected. So what will help and what won't help, right? So what will help? I feel today the biggest problem we have to solve is all these unemployed people. Somehow we have to sustain them through this lockdown period, so that once the lockdown is over, they will be in good enough shape to resume work, right? If you want to restart, you want people to come back, right? And you want services to resume, you want people to be on their feet. If they go broke and they shift back to villages, or they, oh sorry, if they go broke and they go shift back to villages, etc., then you will not have that portion of the economy working at all. Therefore, we need direct income support. Directly, money should be transferred into the accounts of these people. Actually, Indian economy today, India budget is 24, 25 lakh crore. We have enough money and we run enough schemes. It is only necessary to rechannel those schemes into what is needed now, right? We need MSME credit guarantee. What is credit guarantee? They need not directly lend to MSMEs, but because banks are afraid of lending to MSMEs, the government should say up to 10% of MSME loans that you give, we will give a guarantee. If you do that, the banks will feel confident to come and lend to MSMEs. In the end, actually, people may end up not even using this money, but the guarantee will really help lending startup. We need income tax and GST cuts, and the stimulus should be immediate. We've heard a lot of talk from the government saying we will give stimulus over 3 years. Small stimulus is enough and all that. I don't agree with that. I think we need something immediately because the lockdown has gone on for 50 days. What will not help also is quite clear. I feel more farmer support is not needed. Today, you need the farmers to be able to sell their produce. You don't need support. Clearly changing procedure, like instead of filing 10 GST forms, you file 8. That does not help people because the problem is income, not ability to file or comply, right? If you announce infrastructure spending packages, I don't think it will help today because for infrastructure spending to happen, the private sector has to borrow and it has to actually set up projects, which will take time, right? Any stimulus that is deferred over 3-4 years will not help. So what to expect for investors? Now we come to the more relevant part for most of you. So what to expect in the debt markets? I think the debt markets will be quite in a difficult situation in the next 6 months because companies have not been functioning regularly. Their working capital has been under stress, and banks also are not willing to lend so easily to anybody below AAA, right? Bond market also has been a problematic thing recently because foreign investors have been pulling out and there has been an issue with liquidity, right? So it has not been easy for anybody to raise. So in this period, I do expect that the defaults and downgrades in bonds will pick up. If you see rating agencies like CRISIL, etc., they have already said
sorry
that.
to disturb you. Somebody is on. Please mute your.
I'm just muting, sir.
Sorry, ma'am. Please go ahead.
So in the next 6 months or so, I think all of us should expect a spike in the defaults and downgrades of bonds. In the last quarter, if you see, ICRA already said downgrades were 2 times the upgrades. In the next quarter, the ratio can worsen. Liquidity in corporate bonds may suffer. Now, the main reason for this Franklin Templeton crisis was not that people were defaulting, but that though Franklin Templeton was trying to sell the bonds, it could not sell them. That was the problem, right? Actually, AA is not such a low rating, but FT found it could not sell AA bonds that easily, right? Bonds like Shriram Transport, etc., it is not able to sell, though we know that the companies are reputed, right? So if when FPIs pull out from the corporate bond market, liquidity becomes hard to come by. So I feel both of these can affect debt funds, and therefore only investors with some risk appetite should be in debt funds at all. Anybody who is very jittery, who needs regular income,
Yeah, I think there's some problem.
I feel weaker banks will slip into NPA or prompt corrective action because NPA ratio is bound to go up. Now, are you able to hear me?
Yes, it's clear, madam.
No, suddenly it showed that there was some problem.
Yeah, there was something, but it got to. We are able to hear you now. Please go ahead.
Banks, at least, I feel, though they may weaken in terms of financials, RBI or the government will not allow any bank to fail in this period because it will cause enormous confidence loss. But in the case of NBFCs, there is going to be a problem. Also because NBFCs have given moratorium to their borrowers, but they are not getting a moratorium from banks. When RBI announced its stimulus, it's not said that NBFCs have to be given moratorium. So they are like sandwiched. On one side, their borrowers are not paying. On the other side, banks are not willing to lend to all of them. Some of them they are getting finance, but not all of them. So which are the safest segments of NBFCs? I think home loans. In home loans, people don't easily default. Even if you give moratorium, people don't take. So we have some data saying that for home loans, actually 80% of the borrowers have said we will continue to pay EMI. We will not take the moratorium. But truck finance, MSME finance, these are problematic areas because those people earn their cash flows every day and they find it difficult to service their loans, right? So you know which I don't want to name names here. You know who's in truck finance and who's in home finance. So you can be quite cautious based on those businesses. Unsecured loans, anybody who gives out consumer durable loans, etc., it will be hard for the next 6 months because first of all, discretionary purchases will come down. And secondly, I also feel these defaults can happen. If you default, then you can't repossess a washing machine. If you repossess also, it is worthless. So actually, unsecured lending business can be in trouble, right? So over the next 6 months, only the NBFCs who are sitting on a lot of liquidity or cash, they may be in a safe situation. The others may be in trouble. So what should the investment approach be in debt? I feel credit risk you should completely avoid. Anything AA or below you should avoid. It's not because all AA will default. It is because liquidity won't be there in AA, right? So now funds are today, some AMCs are coming and promoting credit risk funds and all. I totally disagree with that. I feel they need flows. That is why they are promoting it. The next 6 months, no fund or AMC or fund manager can tell you what will be the picture on defaults or downgrades. So knowing that there are going to be accidents, you are not going to go on that road, right? It is when you know that accidents will come once in a while that you will take a risk. If you know it is a certainty, why will you take a risk, right? So I feel it is best to avoid credit risk funds. I feel on duration, RBI will try to keep rates low for 6 months and all. But the problem is government security rates are already at 6%. Below this, they can't go too much, in my opinion. And over 2 or 3 years, actually, the rates can go up. If rates go up, what happens to gilt funds and long duration funds? They take losses, right? So I feel this is not the time to take a duration call either or credit risk call, right? So I would today stick to high quality, which is PSU and banking funds, etc., and keep durations very short with debt funds, right? Of course, government of India, while cutting rates on all sorts of instruments, one instrument it has left, maybe because it didn't notice it. It is the GUI 7.75% bond, savings bond, which is available from all the private banks. And I think today that is a really a go-to instrument for most investors. It is a 7-year lock-in instrument, but I think it's going to be a very long time before in India, we are going to see a safe instrument offering 7.75%. We can also, I think, in the coming months, as the state governments and central government borrow, we will see more bond issues coming up. So there is no hurry to rush today and invest in risky instruments. If at all you are investing in FDs or any other instrument, except for the 7.75% bond, I would say you stick to 1 or 2 year duration, because rates will go up after that. No point getting into SBI deposit or some deposit at 5.5% today. It is far better to wait and go in for better rates a little later. Equity markets, with so much uncertainty around earnings, it is very hard to say where it will bottom out. But surely the equity market will bottom out before the economy starts to look up, right? So it can be a very quick process also. Suppose we think the economy is going to recover in 6 months, we can expect the equity market to actually start bottoming out in the next 3 months or so. I've put some indicative numbers here. These are completely theoretical. So what I've done is, Nifty levels are decided by what PE you can give to Nifty earnings. So if you see, for FY21, if you think the Nifty earnings will be 574, today the Bloomberg says that the consensus analyst consensus estimate says Nifty EPS will be 574. So, oh sorry. So based on that consensus estimate, if you give a 17 PE, it will be 9758 will be the market level. If you give a 15 PE, 8610 will be the market level. If you give a 13 PE, 7462 will be the market level, right? This does not mean that exactly at that level the Nifty will bottom out. It means this is the rough fair value for the Nifty if this is the EPS. Similarly, I have said, instead of 574, suppose the earnings are only 500 rupees, what will happen to Nifty at various PE levels, right? So if you are very bearish and you feel all hell will break loose, even then I feel the Nifty has to bottom out at 13 PE forward earnings or something, which is about 6,500, right? Now, if in the worst case scenario, if the earnings come only at 400, which is, this was the earnings about 2 years ago. If it goes back to that level, then you will see the market levels being much lower, right? But I feel this middle thing is somewhat more likely, right? So this is the rough fair value at which I feel the equity markets could go, right? Now coming to gold, I know as investment advisors, all of us have been frustrated by gold at one time or another. Sometimes we give a buy and then it doesn't perform for 7-8 years. Sometimes you don't give a buy, you say get out of gold, and then suddenly it gives 20% CAGR, right? But today I feel there is a strong case. If people are not owning gold up to 10%, they should hold. Even I hold. I have actually gotten rid of some of my equity and bought 10% gold in my portfolio. The reason why I'm doing this is, today, the US and other economies are simply printing money to actually fund their stimulus packages. Just before this COVID thing started, everybody was saying we should exit QE and all that. But now, instead of talking of exiting QE, all of them are actually increasing it. What happens when you keep on printing money and the actual supply of goods and services is constant? It means high inflation, and it also means the value of money keeps eroding, right? So the only counter to that eroding value of money is actually gold. So I feel when COVID and everything is over, then everybody will wake up and they'll say, my God, why do these central banks have so much debt and so much deficit? At that point, I feel that gold will actually perform, and therefore I think gold should be there in your portfolio, not worth holding over 10%, because if things reverse very quickly, then gold won't perform, right? Because in good times, gold doesn't perform. Fine. So I've given all the possible scenarios that I could think of. So one thing all of us should keep in mind is that today we are all in a very difficult situation in our personal lives, health, etc. And so it is very easy to take a extremely pessimistic view of what is forward, right? So whoever speaks also, you usually find they say, oh, things can only go very bad, you don't know how bad it can get. But I would like you to remember one of my earlier slides on how resilient the economy is and how resilient the Indian people are, and maybe things will actually perk up quicker if the government permits lifting and the curve starts to flatten, say by July or something. We can see things reverting quickly also. So we need to be prepared for that, right? Even then, I would say take that bet with equity rather than with debt, right? So I hope this was useful to all of you, and I am stopping my share here. And if any of you want to ask questions, I will try and answer them.
Thank you, ma'am, for that lovely, overview of the economy. We actually had a literal view of how things are. Especially, I was pretty nice of the Nifty levels that you explained. Very, very clear. So I'm going to use this opportunity to ask you the first question, ma'am. So I wanted to check with you a couple of questions. One is uh, this: what's your view on this AT1 bonds? Yes Bank, we had an issue where they wrote off the AT1 bonds, and there is still a lot of AT1 bond exposure investors have. And today, due to illiquidity, we can't even go and sell this in the market. So do you feel that that risk will continue to hang as a sword over our heads, or do you think government will take a view? And I think the case has also been filed with Supreme Court against Yes Bank for writing off the AT1 bonds. What is your view on that? That AT1 bond story I want to understand.
On Yes Bank, I'm not sure what will happen because it's a court decision. But I generally feel from here, the government, at least over the next 6 months, with the situation being so bad, the government will not allow default on AT1 bonds. That's what I feel. RBI as regulator. So if you allow one or two defaults to happen, then the banks cannot raise money through this route, right? And I think now with NPS going up, etc., banks will need to tap the markets for money, no doubt. And AT1 bond will be one of the key instruments. Now, if you allow old bonds to skip payments or default, then new bonds will not get subscribers, right? Simply because of that, not because AT1 bonds are great instruments. AT1 bonds are not good instruments, in my opinion, because this call option makes it very dicey, in my opinion. If it is a limited term, no, suppose you say 10 years bond and I'll give you yield, it is good. But where it is a perpetual bond and only the issuer can actually redeem it, he has a choice. It is like I'm taking money from you for an unlimited period. I'm saying, please lend me money at 10%. I don't know whether I will repay. That is what AT1 bond is. So, but I feel for the next 6 months, basically, because RBI government will be very worried about banks. If there is a run on banks, they are finished. So they will not allow AT1 bonds to default.
Even if it's a private sector bond?
Yes, large banks. Maybe they so to motu, I don't know. But the large banks, I don't think they will permit default.
Okay. Jay has a question, ma'am. He says, how do you think the stimulus is going to be funded? Of course, we are asking you a 15-minute ahead question or a 20-minute question in ahead. But what would you do if you were Nirmala Sitharaman?
Actually, they have expanded their borrowing program already. They have announced that instead of 7.6 lakh crore, they will basically be raising 12 lakh crore, right? That announcement came. So already 4.5 something lakh crore they have provided for through borrowings, market borrowings. The second thing is this government has been actually routing a lot of their borrowings through the National Small Savings Fund, where basically you and I invest in the post office scheme and that goes to the government and they borrow money. That is an excellent route according to me, because already they had budgeted 2 lakh crore from that. They can enhance it. Today there is an appetite for safe instruments on the part of the savers. Everybody wants safety. They don't want anything else, right? So actually if you tap into this, the government can easily borrow, I think 4 lakh crore or something from the small savings scheme. It can offer slightly higher interest rate than SBI. SBI is giving 5.5% for deposit. Let them give 6.5. So if they give slightly higher rates, that is a good source. The The third source, of course, is this monetization or printing of money, which everybody is talking of. In printing of money, it is nothing. The government, as usual, will sell bonds. Instead of selling bonds to banks, it sells bonds to the RBI, and the RBI pays money after printing it. That is what monetization is. I think all three can happen in some combination, and I think it has to happen. They have been too stingy with their stimulus so far. They need to be a little more generous.
But what do you think will happen to our fiscal deficit if they did all what they did,
Yeah.
what they mentioned?
Fiscal
And would it kind of undo all the work that's been done in the past few years?
I feel this particular year it does not matter too much because anyway today the combined deficit between center and the states etc. is 6.5-7%. Okay, I feel with all this overshooting maybe it will go to 10%. Center plus states and all off balance sheet etc. You name one country which doesn't have fiscal deficit problem this year. Every
No,
country has.
I understand, but we can ill afford a rating downgrade by one of the international institutions.
First thing is I feel already India's ratings are too low. Okay, rating agencies are actually being very unfair to India. India, in whatever situation, has never defaulted on its debt.
Okay.
Whereas other countries have defaulted on their debt and they're getting better ratings. We are getting triple B. Okay. So rating agencies are already being unfair to us. If they want to be a little more unfair, I feel it is okay. I'll tell you why I feel it's okay. Because Indian
But
government
isn't there a monetary cost for India for that if they downgrade
for
further?
the government? See, the government of India doesn't borrow abroad at all. It has zero borrowings. So when we are comparing, we are worrying so much about the ratings. The government actually doesn't have to worry because it is not at all going to IMF or anywhere and borrowing anything, right? We've not done it even in 1991. We pledged gold, we immediately actually redeemed it, right? The people who have to worry about that is actually the corporates who are borrowing ECBs. Corporates who are borrowing ECBs will have to pay higher spreads over the LIBOR, right? Or they may find difficulty in paying. But I feel that it's not a problem for the government to worry about so much about the rating agencies. Other thing that may happen is foreign flows into bond market may come in a lesser quantity if we get a down rating grounded. But you tell me already there have been pullouts, right? It is not like when we have our current rating, they're all staying put. They're anyway pulling out. They pull out based on global factors, not local factors. So that is why I feel this rating thing is too overdone and you need not worry about it so much. The government should do what is good for the economy. Now, if we don't do what is good for the economy, 2 months later, rating agencies will come and say, your economy is so bad, so we are downgrading you.
So anyway, you're going to be caught in that.
Correct. So you might as well do the correct thing and then get downgraded.
Sure. Done. Ma'am, Mohan Ram has a point. Very nice presentation in a simple manner. All the best. What is your view on Franklin fiasco?
Why, will I be quoted outside this or is it off the record?
You are being recorded, but definitely you'll not be quoted. Please go ahead.
My view is that they have been very unfair to investors by having these credit strategies in so many funds. It is okay. Santosh Kamath is very good at credit, no doubt about it. They should have restricted this strategy to 1 or 2 of their funds, but having it across 6 funds. And you often find similar securities in all the 6 portfolios. So if one gets affected, everything gets affected, right? They manage the concentration risk, etc. very well initially. But the problem is if the market is not liquid and you run 25,000 crore of assets based on illiquid securities, you know the risks, right? It is not, I feel it is not due to Corona or something. It is a structural problem in the market which has been there for a long time. So AA and below is not very liquid. We know that. When things get bad, it gets more illiquid. So that mismatch was known to them. I can't say they didn't know. I think they could have possibly pulled the trigger in January or something. In that case, I feel the borrowings would not have gone up so much. Today, because of the borrowings, only all of us are facing delays in getting back the money. That is why there is this mismatch between the average maturity and getting back your money, right? If the borrowings had been close to 10%, I feel more quickly they could have actually got back the money. So that's my feeling about it. I do feel there is a place for credit risk strategy, but not in this market. There in certain markets, yes.
Okay, this is too risky, dicey for that. Vasudevan has a question. How would a 10% exposure in gold impact the overall portfolio? Even if gold gives a 50% return from here,
Yeah.
That's the question. Assuming other asset classes fall down by even 20%, what kind of an impact would that have on a portfolio?
It will have only limited impact, but when you see your portfolio value, you will not see the losses. So the advantage of gold is it moves in exactly the opposite direction of equity. I've experienced this personally. So if equity is falling by 50%, gold won't go up by 50%, but gold will go up by 10%. Just that opposite move, it makes a difference to your overall return. So your portfolio value is smoother over time. But you can ask, why can't you have 40% gold? Because gold is the strange asset which doesn't perform for 10 years and performs for 5 years suddenly. So 10 years you have to sit without returns, which is very frustrating, for all of us. Yeah.
Absolutely. Ma'am, Niranjan Kumar has this question: does government has the capacity to revive the economy? I'm going to kind of paraphrase this question a bit.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you a little different question to what he has asked. Is 20 lakh crores, in your opinion, enough to revive the Indian economy?
Absolutely, it's a very large amount. But you need to know the details of whether they're really spending 20 lakh crore or it is just reallocation. See, already they have presented a budget for this year, right? And the size of the budget was about 30 lakh crore, if I remember. So if they're going to just change some of the expenditure from there to here, from one khajana to other, I don't think it will help. But if this is 20 lakh crore is going to be substantial spending, then yes. And as I said in my presentation, where they spend also matters. I feel direct income support, MSME credit guarantee, these are important steps, not more Kisan and things like that.
Okay. So we have last time for just two more questions, ma'am. So I'm going to be quick. Srinivasan has this question. Agriculture seems to be in a better wicket, as you had indicated. Although there is good monsoon and good harvest, still who will buy them till such time things are in order, which only makes them warehouse and unable to get the money? Do you see a challenge in that?
Correct. But the thing is, I think essentials all of us are buying. In fact, in my household, I'm certainly buying more vegetables than I used to buy because I'm cooking 3 times a day.
All of us are.
Everybody is at home, so we are cooking a lot. So I'm buying. But apart from this lighter thing, I have seen a news report also how initially in the first week of lockdown, apparently, the only commodities that got sold were groceries like cooking oil, dal, rice, and then
And there were panic buying also.
There was panic buying. All of us bought for 3 months and kept. Okay. After that, in the second week onwards, there has been a change in the pattern. FMCG companies are saying ready-to-eat foods have started selling, like MTR ready idli and all that. That has started selling. So people also, they get used to such situations and they start looking forward to better things, right? Because you're bored of your home cooking, you're buying MTR, right? So slowly, I feel you will also go to eating out. It will not, you will not really stop. Yeah. So I think it will get back to normal.
Oh, ma'am, Natarajan has, so I'm going to give Natarajan the last question. So what is your view on the bad banks? There was an article about bad banks in the offing.
Yeah.
Do you think India is ready for a big bad bank? And what is your views?
I think that may be one of the part of the stimulus. Otherwise, I don't know how the 20 lakh number will come, crore.
Okay.
So bad bank will basically be, it will take all the NPS of these banks' books and it will slowly try to sell them, right, later.
Like what UTI Suti did.
Exactly. But the problem is, with a bad bank, the bad bank first needs the capital, no? Always in India, the bad bank ideas got stuck because, first of all, somebody has to put in that 60,000 crore with which it will buy these bad assets, and later it will sell the assets and get 60 or 70,000 crore. But somebody has to initially foot the bill. Who is that someone? That is, till date, it has not been clarified. Now, if government announces that RBI will be that someone, RBI has sitting on huge reserves on its balance sheet. Suppose RBI is going to put in 1 lakh crore into bad bank and it says, after bad bank takes over everything, 2 years later they'll sell everything and give me back 1 lakh crore. That is possible. It is not a bad idea today in this situation.
Fair enough, ma'am. I think we are 10 minutes to go before Nirmala Sitharaman comes, and I think it's only fair that we start winding down this discussion. Please stay online while I invite our secretary Shobana to do a formal vote of thanks. Over to you, Shobana.
Yeah, thank you, Babu. Madam, that was a very Very good session. We could relate each and everything. It was very simple. There was no jargons, no big technology term, nothing was there. It was very simple and to the point. Whatever doubts we had, it was completely addressed. Thank you so much for that. Sharing with us all your findings and your opinions with us today. It was really valuable at this point. And you also gave us a positive outlook. That was the most important now, because with so much of negative, and we also are into, although we say we are very this informed and all, we also have that anxiety. So that was the best in the session today. Thank you so much. It was very simple and effective.
I'm seeing so many thank you messages. Thank you so much for giving me a patient hearing. Though it's somewhat a boring kind of a topic, but but I hope I made it a little.
Even your article in that about that Franklin fiasco, I found it so interesting. You make the readers interesting. It makes it interesting, and also it clears all our doubts. That's the plus of your presentation always. Thank you so much.
I'm sorry I couldn't read all the comments, but maybe later if there's a recording, can you send it to me? I'd like to.
I will send a recording, and also we will share your mail ID with our participants if you are okay with it, so that they can address their queries if you are able.
Some people are asking for the PPT. Definitely, I can share it with the IFA Galaxy people, and you can share it with everybody who's registered for the webinar.
That will help really. Thank you so much, madam. Thank you.
Don't take my nifty projections and all as God statement. It is just a projection. That's it.
Thank you, Aarti. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Thank you, Shini. Yeah.
So we have our next session on Friday. That is with again with a that's also a very interesting session. Mrs. Rupa Venkat Krishnan, the Secretary FIFA, she is going to address the session on Friday, 3 to 4. The topic is going to be how to think big as an IFA. What are the challenges and opportunities? That's going to be the topic. I invite each and everyone to join us for that session on Friday. Until then, bye. Let's join for the Nirmala Sitharaman's call and let's hear what's in store for us. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.